Here we are with the iPhone 15 Pro Max playing Resident Evil Village. Now I'm going to show you the type of settings that I do have set, which I will share. We're going to go down to options and I set the ASUS Rog Ally exactly the same. Now I am playing it on a Xbox controller, an Xbox Series X controller if you are curious what I am using. And now in the display area on HDR mode, I have it set to off, sRGB on. And I have the screen resolution to 2338 by 1080. You can see the graphics memory takes about 3.7, close to 3.8 gigabytes out of 5.8 gigabytes out of Apple's A17 Pro SoC. Frame rate is set to variable, and as the other options, which I will also put in my settings. As you can see, I'm kind of scrolling through it quick, but you can slow down this video if you want to see what I set it to. It doesn't have a problem responding to the controller, but I'm really curious to see what type of temperatures that we will pull out of Resident Evil Village and how well it will play compared to a console, or play as well as the ASUS Rog Ally. I'm going to kind of circle around slowly. You can see a bit of choppiness. Clearly looks about 30 frames per second. Now you're probably wondering why I didn't get the resolution to a full widescreen monitor. Well, apparently it does not give me that option. It could also be the device I'm using, which is the Anker hub, which I use the same one for my Asus Rog Ally. Instead, I will have to play it in the closest and most clear settings as I can to make it a very fair debate. Now, one thing I did notice as well is in the settings, it doesn't have ray tracing, as it was mentioned in the press conference. We'll see if they do add ray tracing in future updates. So, show you what a cutscene looks like on the iPhone 15 Pro Max. So at first, this cutscene seems to play pretty decent. There's no issues. It almost looks like you're playing it exactly on a console. But can the iPhone 15 Pro Max keep up, and will it be able to hold future cutscenes such as this? And also, that's another thing that comes up is notifications. Make sure you set your phone to do not disturb if you do try to play any of your games. So one thing is, if you do have your phone on standby and you don't touch the controller for a little bit, make sure to set your iPhone to a longer wait time, because otherwise it will try to go to sleep and it kind of resets your connection and ruins your connection. Full on console game on a phone. And soon we'll get Resident Evil 4 on the iPhone 15 Pro Max to compare it to the ASUS Rog Ally. Sometimes it does fall below 30 frames per second. Now it's probably about like around 20. This is all because you're going through a field of grass. And no, not that type of grass. This is all because it requires more frame rendering when you are going through the field of grass and you are in an action sequence. So it requires more renders and the speed has to catch up on the graphical processor. Looks like it struggles a little bit on that side. And it looks like there is a little bit of audio lag. This could be because you are playing on a bigger display. Because you are playing on a bigger display, this could cause some input lag or even some graphical lag because you are playing on a higher resolution monitor. But will this be the fact if you play portably? Now we're going to hook up the ASUS Rog Ally and we're going to see if the Apple 15 Pro Max can really compete against a device such as the ASUS Rog Ally. Just to remind you, both of these devices are on the first generation, and well, we'll talk more about the argument as soon as I have this all together. Here, I'm just going to adjust the resolution to see if it's possible to adjust it to my monitor size. Now, the biggest difference you could already notice was that you're actually able to get a 1440p monitor. Now, just to remind you, this is just a 1440p monitor. It's not even 4K. But the ASUS ROG Ally shows the capability of doing so. And also, in fairness, now we're going to go into the display settings here, and we're going to compare just like how I set everything similar to the iPhone Pro Max to make it a fair comparison. I'm also going to retest the iPhone Pro 15 Pro Max portably. And this is the thing. I just want to show you these settings just to show you that everything is exactly the same. All the settings are practically the same, and the only reason why the graphics memory is taking up more is because it is a much larger display. So we're gonna go back here and we're gonna load the game and see how well it plays back for us. So we still get a little bit of choppiness, but it's not as bad. It's a lot more clear. I'm gonna turn around slowly. Seems smooth. Even the fire looks outstanding. I'm gonna spin around quicker. You get to already see how much smoother that is. So we're gonna go ahead. With this very cutscene, it doesn't require too much renders, and it shouldn't be too much different from the iPhone 15 Pro Max. We're getting about 58 degrees Celsius on the APU, which is very decent. That's actually really not that bad. Next, we're about to head into the cabin just to test out the cutscene to see if it struggles or if there's any type of audio lag once we enter this cabin.
Please, don't hurt us. Whoa, it's okay. I'm not gonna hurt you. We're just glad to see no.
It's playing way smoother, as you already see. The frame rates are way higher at around 46. Compared to what we saw, we got as low as 15 to 20 frame rates, I would say, about to where it was really hard to play. Next, I'm trying to run through some sequences, and I'm going to run the same exact scenes on the iPhone 15 Pro Max. I want to see if it can be able to play the scenes the same exact way as the ASUS Rog Ally can. Now, you can already see that the scenes are a lot smoother on the ASUS Rog Ally, but can the iPhone 15 Pro Max do the same? And hurry up to some action here. Really don't know why I'm button mashing here because this is just a cutscene. Now for the iPhone 15 Pro Max. So we have the iPhone 15 Pro Max hooked up, and now we put it in Do Not Disturb, and we will attempt to make sure everything is nice and clear before we continue on Resident Evil Village and proceed to the same part where we reached. Right now we're going to replay that scene where we're trying to escape out of that little cottage. You probably already noticed that there is a little bit of lag when it comes to this cutscene, and there is a bit of audio lag as well. Everything moves a little bit slower, it's a bit choppy, and you can even hear his voice. Let's try a intense action scene from Resident Evil Village, and now that felt like slow motion when I was shooting. A bit of audio lag, but I'm suspecting it could be something to do with the resolution, but we will try to tweak the settings later. So let's see what type of temperatures we're pulling out the iPhone 15 Pro Max now. So I'm getting about 42.5 right now. So now we're going to compare it to the ASUS Rog Ally and see how well the playback is compared to playing on a iPhone 15 Pro Max individually. Now you saw it on a bigger display and had an idea of how both devices are. But what about the portability side here? How will it deliver on the ASUS Rog Ally? Will there be any type of delay or audio delay when it comes to the playback of the ASUS Rog Ally? We don't have any audio delay or any voice delay. We're getting a decent 60 frames per second for the current settings it's at. Right now we're gonna head to a action sequence to see what type of frame rate drop that we would get outside of the Resident Evil Village on the ASUS Rog Ally. When it comes to action scenes, it's a little bit more intense because you have a lot more frame rendering that is going on, and it gives you a better indication when the action actually happens on games such as Resident Evil Village, on something like a ASUS Rog Ally, and how the game would actually react. So let's give it a shot, see what happens. So we're getting about like a steady frame, about 82 frames per second, about 70 to 82 frames per second. And now, as you can see, the frame rates drop down to about 75 to 80. As you notice, it's dropping just under 70. We're gonna head over to the next action sequence. We're just gonna escape out of this hellhole, and we're gonna find out how the next action scene takes, where we will fight a few zombies. And as you see, we get pretty decent frame rates. And as you notice, 15 watts is the APU where it is set at. So let alone, can you imagine if you boost it up even more to about 25 watts to 30 watts of what type of power the ASUS ROG Ally can give you. But we're gonna try again this action scene one more time on the iPhone 15 Pro Max. I bet that didn't feel too good. So we got a frame rate drop about under 64. Now, if you notice, the action scenes don't really take a lot of frame rates for the ASUS ROG Ally. It runs really smooth. Even the scenes without the action scene, we're getting a decent 100 to 110 frames per second, which is really nice. All right, let's get some serious weapons out here. We had a couple action scenes there, so you have an idea of how that looks. Now let's compare it to the iPhone 15 Pro Max. So we're back on the iPhone 15 Pro Max, and we're just about to head into that cutscene. You probably can notice the difference already in display and speed. So you can see the audio sync is off. Let's go into here real quick. Skip. We're gonna try to change out the option right back to display and try to change it back to its original setting here, just to help the performance wise. And again, the iPhone doesn't like to enter the Resident Evil settings when it comes to screen resolution, so typically you gotta exit out and go back in. If you flip it too quickly, it will definitely freeze up on you, so take your time. So this should help increase the performance from what I'm thinking. So let's continue here, and let's see if we get some better frame rates. That's better. So we got a less audio lag once we change the display resolution. That's a big issue when it comes to the iPhone 15 Pro Max. Now you want to play with the default setting for now. So if you do plan to play on a bigger TV, or if you want to play on a monitor, and you change your resolution, it's going to affect the gameplay and cutscenes. But on the standard setting, the 1560 by 720, it seems to play a little bit more smooth. So let's hurry up and we'll go into an action scene. We're gonna enter this room where this crazy bee lady is, or these swarm of flies are attacking you, and then she bites me. So we're gonna just hurry up and go to this other area where the zombies are. You could probably notice a little bit of choppiness, but it's definitely a lot more smoother. Now let's see how well these zombies react. Slightly choppy, but wait. So we got a bit of stutter, it speeds up a little bit. So there's moments to where it does slow down slowly, Then there's moments like this where you forget that you are actually playing on a Apple iPhone. It can be pretty impressive at times, but it still doesn't run completely smooth. It's running at about 30 frames per second, I would say. Alright, so now you've seen a action scene through. Now, time to finally give you my thoughts of how the iPhone 15 Pro Max compares to something like the ASUS Rog Ally. Can it really be a replacement for game consoles? Could you play the iPhone 15 Pro Max? Maybe you don't even have to get an Xbox Series X or a PlayStation 5. First off, I do gotta mention the display settings are on its default settings. The only things that have been changed is the color space is now sRGB and HDR mode is off, and the resolution is slightly different. Now, I put the ASUS Rog Ally just like the iPhone 15 Pro Max for a very fair comparison. So here are my thoughts. The A17 Pro, which is the SoC inside the iPhone 15 Pro Max, is quite impressive, especially for the graphics it can produce. In fact, that this SoC can produce more teraflops compared to the PS4. But can it really be as playable as a console like PS4? Bruh, if you watched this whole video, you already know this answer, but I will explain my thoughts in the first place. Yes, it is very impressive that the iPhone 15 Pro Max is able to play a full console game such as Resident Evil Village, and soon Resident Evil 4 will be released on something like the iPhone 15 Pro Max. Now, the playability of this game, if you're in just regular walking mode, not in a action scene, it runs pretty decent, runs pretty smooth. Sometimes you forget that you're actually playing on something like an iPhone 15 Pro Max. When you are playing on a bigger display, such as a monitor or TV, I wouldn't suggest to change the resolution and probably leave it the way it is. If you do change the resolution, do expect the game to freeze up because it does not like if you go into the menu and change up the resolution. You will have to practically exit the game and you would have to re-enter the game and change up the resolution slowly. If you don't, the game will freeze. This is a fair warning to anybody, but this may vary, especially during a update or even Apple's updates, depending on what they push out. When you enter cutscenes, you will notice a bit of ghosting, lagging, and even some audio delay. And you know how annoying it is, especially when you see the characters' mouths move and no audio comes out until about a minute or two later. It tells you that Resident Evil Village cutscenes, especially on the iPhone 15 Pro Max on a larger display, is quite not cut out for that just quite yet, unless you leave it on its standard resolution of 1560 by 720, which you will not fill the screen that way, but instead you will just have a smaller box on your TV. Is it quite ready to replace a console? Well, let's talk about the action scenes first. The action scenes are the same exact way when you do play on a larger display. It has some ghosting, stuttering, some lagging, and it is hard to enjoy thoroughly, especially if you're used to playing on something like a console or playing on something like, especially if you're playing from a PC. When you are playing on a larger display, it is also prone to thermal throttling, which practically means that there is a bottleneck on the A17 Pro because there is not any proper heat ventilation, which is something I warned on X a long time ago, that the iPhone 15 Pro Max more than likely won't be able to play full console games comfortably because of that reason, and the premonition actually happened. But how does it play portably? How well does the iPhone 15 Pro Max actually play if you're just waiting on an appointment, or maybe you're just waiting for your car's tires to be changed out or something? Well, I do gotta say it does play pretty decent. You get a decent frame cap of 30 frames per second, and when it does go into the cutscenes, it actually plays out a little bit better. Don't expect a smooth 60 frames per second on a iPhone 15 Pro Max. Instead, you're better off capping at 30 frames per second and then playing the phone through. At least you would save a little bit more on the heat that will be produced from the A17 Pro, plus the degradation of the iPhone 15 Pro Max battery while you're playing Resident Evil Village. Now, is it ready to replace a console? I think by what I just spoke about, you probably can come up to the conclusion that this doesn't even replace a PS4. It is a nice introduction to console games on phones, but we are still quite a ways from advancing to that point. Bruh, it even struggles in cutscenes. What does that tell you? How does the ASUS Rog Ally play Resident Evil Village? Well, I can tell you this. On a full display, it plays 100% well. You get about a decent 30 to 40 frames per second on a full 1440p monitor, a widescreen monitor. And on top of it, it plays up to 120 frames per second portably in your hand, which is very impressive. And the best part, the thermals doesn't really get all that hot. We tested it at 15 watts, let alone just imagine if you pushed it to 25 to 30 watts. If you really want to play portably, I'd highly suggest getting a ASUS Rog Ally over getting a iPhone 15 Pro Max, and just let the iPhone 15 Pro Max do its job of making calls and sending out text and browsing the internet. The ASUS Rog Ally is the one that is more meant for gaming purposes. So I hope you found this content very useful. If you did, make sure to give it a thumbs up. If you know anybody else who is interested in getting a iPhone 15 Pro Max or a ASUS Rog Ally, or is even interested in seeing this whole Resident Evil Village comparison, make sure you send them this video. And if you're not part of the Big Wonderful Fan Band, make sure you go down and hit the subscribe button. And don't forget to hit the notification bell. And for all the newest updates, make sure you follow my Twitter handle right here, as it is the same as my TikTok and IG. What are your thoughts of the iPhone 15 Pro Max or the ASUS Rog Ally? Let me know in the comments down below. And also, I apologize if this video is so long. I just wanted to try to give you the best details possible before making your purchase of Resident Evil Village, regardless if it's on the iPhone 15 Pro Max or maybe you're even looking at the hardware. But if you're interested in any of the hardware, make sure you go down in the description box down below. Thank you guys so much for watching. This is Chris Mizo signing out.